My name is Ava Collins, and I learned pretty early in life that power never looks the way you think it does. It isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It isn't the person who talks the most in the room or takes the biggest chair. Real power is quiet. Steady. The kind that sits in the back of a boardroom and watches everyone else act like they already know how the story ends. My cousin Ethan never understood that. To him, power was a spotlight. A microphone. A title printed on a door. He believed leadership was something you performed, not something you earned. And when my grandfather died last year, leaving behind Collins Innovations, a company he built from scratch, Ethan saw an opportunity he thought was waiting specifically for him. He didn't just want the company. He wanted the crown. Grandpa passed on a Sunday morning in late September, and by Monday afternoon Ethan was already walking around the headquarters like he owned the place. He shook hands too hard, laughed too loudly, slapped backs like he was everyone's best friend. I watched him from the far end of the hallway that day, the same way you watch a child running with scissors. You know something bad is going to happen. You just don't know when. The thing people forget is that Collins Innovations had 3 major branches and dozens of quiet partners. My grandfather was careful. He built safety nets into the structure. Backups for the backups. Layers of ownership no one fully understood except his attorney. And me. Because he told me things Ethan never bothered to learn. But the rest of the family didn't know that. So when Ethan called a temporary leadership meeting 3 days after the funeral, nobody questioned it. They walked into the conference room and let him take the head seat. He wore a navy suit that looked too expensive for someone who never earned a paycheck from the company. My aunt fussed over him like he was a prince, straightening his tie while he pretended to look humble. I arrived 10 minutes early, but I took a seat in the second row. I didn't need to be in the front. I didn't need attention. I just needed to listen. Ethan stood up like he was about to give a TED talk. Thanks for coming. Obviously this is a difficult time for all of us. But we have to keep the company strong. Grandpa would have wanted stability. He paused dramatically. So until everything is finalized with the estate, I'll be acting CEO. A murmur went through the room. Not agreement. Not support. Confusion. One of the board members, Mr. Hargrove, lifted his glasses. Ethan, who appointed you? Ethan smiled with teeth. The family has come to an understanding. And as his closest male descendant, I'll be stepping in to ensure continuity. Another murmur. A few raised eyebrows. He pushed on. Look, we all know I've been groomed for this. Grandpa and I were close. We talked about the business all the time. That wasn't true. Grandpa couldn't stand the way Ethan talked over people. But Ethan understood something about grief. It makes people hesitate. It makes them polite. And in that hesitation, Ethan saw an opening. He held up a folder. These are my preliminary plans for stabilizing quarterly revenue. We need modernization. Aggressive marketing restructuring. I want new division heads for research and finance. The old guard needs to move aside. The old guard. That was the phrase that did it. The board members stiffened. These were people who had worked with my grandfather for decades. They weren't old. They were loyal. Beside me, someone muttered, "Who does this kid think he is?" Ethan ignored it. He passed out packets, as if paperwork made his claims real. He talked for 30 minutes straight, sprinting through ideas he barely understood. He mispronounced the name of our own patent. He claimed our overseas partner was in Germany, even though the company had been headquartered in Sweden since before he was born. But he didn't notice. Ethan never noticed anything that wasn't about him. When the meeting ended, he straightened his suit and walked out like a conquering hero. I stayed behind. I watched Mr. Hargrove tuck his papers under his arm, shaking his head the whole time. I watched 2 senior engineers leave without speaking to anyone. I watched the board members exchange looks. They weren't angry yet. They were waiting. Because everyone knows something about business. Temporary leaders rarely stay temporary. Aunt Melissa cornered me near the elevator afterward. She had always been Ethan's biggest supporter, the kind of mother who believed every achievement in his life was miraculous even when he didn't deserve credit for any of it. She put her hand on my arm and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ava dear, I hope you aren't upset. This is the natural order of things. Ethan is stepping up for the family. We all have our roles. Yours will become clearer once the estate papers are settled. I stared at her. My role. Like I was waiting for someone else to assign me a purpose. I lifted my chin. I'm not upset. She blinked, surprised. Good. Because Ethan needs support right now. This is a lot of pressure. He'll need the family behind him while everything transitions. I nodded once. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. Because she had no idea what transition really meant. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan moved into the CEO office without permission. He replaced the photos, removed the antique globe Grandpa loved, redecorated the entire space in matte black furniture that looked more like a nightclub than a business suite. He called himself acting CEO in emails. He told employees to report to him directly. He fired 2 middle managers because they didn't align with his new direction. He hired his college roommate as a consultant for an absurd salary. And every time the board questioned him, he said, "The estate is still processing. Everything will be official soon." My phone buzzed constantly with messages from employees I knew personally, people who had been with the company since I was a kid. "Ava, what is happening? Do you know anything? Why is Ethan acting like he owns the place?" I didn't answer any of them. Not yet. 3 weeks after Grandpa's death, the day finally came. The estate attorney scheduled a private meeting. Just me. Just him. Just a stack of documents as thick as a brick. His office smelled like old leather and eucalyptus oil. He was a soft-spoken man with silver hair and calm eyes. When I sat down, he folded his hands and looked at me the way people look at someone before delivering news that is going to shift their entire reality. "Ava, your grandfather trusted you." My breath caught. Not because I didn't know it, but because hearing it aloud made something inside me settle. The attorney continued, "He filed these documents 2 years ago. Updated them again 8 months ago. And finalized everything 6 weeks before he passed." He slid a thick binder toward me. I stared at it, my fingertips resting lightly on the cover. "Your grandfather wanted the company to stay in the family," he said. "But he did not want it to fall into the wrong hands." I opened the binder slowly. Inside were ownership schedules, share distribution charts, trust declarations, percentage breakdowns, stock transitions, corporate voting rights. All written in legal language, organized in columns and diagrams. At the bottom of the first page, highlighted in yellow, was my name. Ava Collins. Majority shareholder. 52% controlling interest. My cousin owned nothing. Not 1%. Not a single inherited share. My throat tightened. He didn't groom Ethan. He groomed me. The attorney's voice softened. He knew Ethan wasn't ready. Or responsible. Or capable. Your grandfather believed in you completely. And legally, the company belongs to you now. The room felt like it shifted under me. Ethan had spent the last month trying to seize the company. But the company had been mine the entire time. And the board was about to find out. When I say my heartbeat got louder, I do not mean in a dramatic way. I mean literally, in that quiet office, with the blinds half closed and the soft ticking of the wall clock, I could hear my own pulse in my ears while I stared at my name on that page. 52%. I did the math in my head 3 times, as if numbers could somehow lie. The attorney watched me with that patient expression people use when they know your world is rearranging and they cannot rush it for you. He slid another page forward, this one simpler, a clean breakdown of ownership. 32% in a family trust allocated to me. 20% in grandfather's personal holdings, transferred upon his death. The remaining shares scattered in small blocks among long-term employees, early investors, and the retirement fund. Nothing for Ethan. Not one block. Not one hidden clause. His name did not appear on a single ownership line. I swallowed. "You are sure this is correct?" He nodded. "I prepared the documents myself. Your grandfather was very clear. He wanted formal proof that you would not just inherit passively, but control actively." The word control made my palms sweat. I had worked in the company quietly for years. Middle management in operations. The kind of position where you know how everything actually functions but no one in a suit asks your opinion in board meetings. I knew our suppliers, our bottlenecks, our best teams and our weak spots. I knew the way the company felt when it was healthy and the way it twitched when something was wrong. Ethan did not know any of that. He knew how to talk loudly about markets and vision and disruption. He knew a lot of buzzwords and very little reality. The attorney opened a folder and pulled out a smaller document, crisp and simple compared to the others. Your grandfather also wrote this. He handed it to me. At the top it said, in my grandfather's handwriting, letter of intent. Ava, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer there to tell you this myself. You always preferred plain language, so here it is. You are in charge. Not Ethan. Not Melissa. Not any of the loud ones. You. My throat tightened immediately. I know they will not like it. That is why I did not tell them. They will tell you you are too quiet, too careful, too soft. Do not listen. You are thorough. You ask questions. You see people. That is why I trust you. I blinked against the sting in my eyes. Ethan likes the idea of power, the letter went on. You understand the weight of it. There is a difference. Do not let him bully his way into the chair just because he cannot imagine sitting anywhere else. I had to set the letter down for a second and breathe. The attorney waited until I looked up. He spoke gently. There will be pushback. Your cousin has already set himself up publicly. But the law is completely on your side. The moment we file these ownership records with the board and the state, there will be no question. I exhaled slowly. What happens next? We schedule a formal board meeting. Extraordinary session. I will present the updated ownership. You will attend. The board will recognize you as majority shareholder. From there, you decide who leads. You decide who leads. Not the board. Not my aunt. Not Ethan. Me. A small part of me panicked. I did not want to humiliate anyone. I did not want drama. I did not want a power struggle that turned into some family circus. But another part of me, the part that had watched Ethan strut around firing people and redecorating what he did not own, sat up straighter. He brought this on himself. I left the attorney's office that day with a copy of the ownership schedule, the letter from my grandfather and a weight on my shoulders that felt heavy and right at the same time. I did not tell anyone that night. Not my friends, not my father, not my co-workers when they texted to ask if I had heard anything. I needed one night where the information just sat inside me, not yet disturbed by anyone else's fear or anger or expectations. The next morning, the email went out. Subject, Notice of Extraordinary Board Session. It was from the attorney's office, not from Ethan. It included the date, 2 days later, and the time. It stated that all board members were required to attend. It did not explain why. Within 30 minutes my phone lit up with messages. What is this about? Do you know anything? Is this about Ethan? I wrote back to one person only, Hargrove, one of the longest-serving board members who had known me since I was old enough to carry coffee into meetings. I typed, just be there. Everything will make sense. He replied with 3 words. About time, kid. At lunch that day, Ethan strutted down the hallway like nothing was coming. He knocked on my open office door, leaning in with a crooked smile. Big meeting in 2 days, he said. Looks like the attorney finally wants to formalize things. You ready for a new boss? I looked up from my screen, keeping my face neutral. We already have a boss. He grinned wider. Exactly. He pointed both thumbs at his chest. Me. I tilted my head slightly. Acting. His smile faltered for half a second. Then he laughed. Temporary wording. You know how these lawyers are. I held his gaze. Yeah. I do. He did not catch the shift in my tone. He never listened to me closely enough to hear the difference between passive and certain. He tapped the doorframe. Dress nice. Big day. Maybe they will shuffle you into a better position once everything settles. He walked away humming, completely convinced the universe was arranging itself around him. It almost felt unfair not to warn him. Almost. The next 2 days. Felt like moving underwater. Conversations sounded slower. Colors looked sharper. Even my footsteps in the hallway seemed louder to me. People whispered in break rooms about rumors, about restructuring, about whether Ethan was going to clean house. The morning of the meeting, I stood in my bathroom mirror longer than usual. I pulled my hair back into a low bun. Simple makeup. Plain navy suit that fit well but did not shout for attention. I did not want to look like I was performing either. I wanted to look like what I was meant to be. Prepared. When I arrived at the building, the lobby buzzed. You can feel tension in the air of a company as easily as you feel heat. People spoke in low voices. Some stared at their phones, some pretended to read notices on the wall. Ethan came in 30 minutes later than he should have, coffee in hand, laughing with two people from marketing. He wore a tailored charcoal suit and a bright tie that looked more like a party accessory than something for a serious meeting. He clapped the receptionist on the shoulder and said, "Big day, huh? Grandpa would be proud." She forced a smile. We all went upstairs. The boardroom had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The long table gleamed, polished to an almost ridiculous shine. The framed photograph of my grandfather that usually sat on a side credenza had been moved back into place after Ethan's decorating spree. That little detail made me feel steadier. He was still here, in the way that mattered. The board members filed in one by one, sitting in their usual positions. Some nodded at Ethan. Some did not bother. When I entered, I saw a few eyes flick toward me, curious. I took a seat along the side wall, not at the table. The attorney sat near the head, a neat stack of folders in front of him. Ethan slid into the chair at the head of the table as if it belonged to him. He rested his hands on the wood, shoulders back, expression serious in a way that tried too hard. "Thanks everyone for coming," he began, before the attorney could speak. "I think we all know why we are here. The estate process is moving forward, and I am ready to formalize my role." The attorney cleared his throat gently. "Mr. Collins." Ethan held up a hand. "I will only take a moment. I have prepared a new strategic outline and I want the board to feel confident in the direction I am taking the company." His aunt, my aunt, Melissa, sat near the end of the table, beaming like a pageant mom. The attorney waited, polite but unmoved. Ethan launched into a short version of the same speech he had given weeks before. Stability, innovation, modern leadership, family legacy. He used every phrase he thought sounded convincing. When he finished, he sat down like a man expecting applause. The room was quiet. No one clapped. The attorney finally spoke. "Thank you, Mr. Collins. If there are no objections, I would like to proceed with the official agenda, as this meeting is being recorded and the notices have been filed with state authorities." Hargrove nodded. "Please." The attorney opened his folder and carefully slid several documents to the center of the table. "As counsel for the estate of Robert Collins, I am here to present updated ownership information and the decedent's formal instructions regarding corporate control." Ethan nodded, clearly trying to hide how eager he was. "Of course. Let us make it official." The attorney continued, his voice steady. "At the time of death, Robert Collins held or controlled 52% of Collins Innovations voting shares through a combination of personal holdings and a family trust. Those shares have now transferred to the designated beneficiary." Ethan smiled, already half rising from his chair. The attorney did not look at him. He said, clearly and firmly, "The beneficiary of those majority shares is Ava Collins." The room went completely still. You could hear the faint buzz of the overhead lights. The soft ticking of someone's watch. A pen clattering once as it slipped from someone's hand. Ethan froze mid-movement, half standing, half sitting, like his body had forgotten what it was doing. His mouth opened a little. No sound came out. Aunt Melissa's smile fell straight off her face. Every pair of eyes around the table turned from Ethan to me. I sat against the side wall, hands folded in my lap, heartbeat hard but steady. I did not move. I did not speak. I did not smile. The attorney placed a copy of the ownership schedule on the table and turned it so the board could see clearly. "As of the filing date," he continued, "Miss Collins holds 52% of the voting shares. The remaining shares are distributed among legacy board members, senior partners, and the employee trust. There are no shares in Mr. Ethan Collins's name. No shares. Not temporary. Not pending. None." It felt like the floor dropped under Ethan's chair and he had nothing to grab. His voice finally cracked out, too loud, too high. "That has to be incorrect." The attorney did not flinch. "The records have been reviewed and verified by the state and the corporate registrar." Ethan looked around the room wildly, searching for someone to back him. His eyes landed on Hargrove. "You knew about this?" Hargrove raised his brows. "I knew your grandfather did not like surprises." That was the closest thing to a smirk the man had ever shown in his life. Ethan's gaze snapped to me. "You. What did you do?" I met his eyes calmly. I did what Grandpa asked. I listened. I let the silence sit there, thick and undeniable. The boardroom dynamic shifted, visibly, like a tide turning. Ethan was no longer the center. He was just another person at the table. And for the first time since Grandpa died, everyone in that room understood where power actually sat. Not in volume. Not in assumption. In ownership. In my name printed clearly in black ink on every page. The attorney cleared his throat. The next item on the agenda is to recognize Miss Collins as the majority shareholder and to invite her to designate interim leadership for the chief executive role. Every head turned toward me again. It was my move now. Every head in the room turned toward me. Some curious. Some shocked. Some relieved. A few, especially the older board members, already looked like they had expected this for years. But Ethan looked like someone had just yanked the ground out from under him. His fingers tightened around the arm of the chair, like if he held on hard enough, no one could take the company away from him. I stood slowly. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just steady. The attorney nodded to me with a quiet, encouraging look. The board members leaned slightly forward. They weren't looking at Ethan anymore. They were watching me. For the first time in my life, I understood what Grandpa meant when he told me, power isn't loud, Ava. It's the one voice people stop talking to hear. I took a breath. Thank you all for being here. I know the last few weeks have been chaotic. We've all been grieving and trying to navigate the uncertainty left behind. But my grandfather was careful with this company. He didn't want confusion. He wanted clarity. I laid a hand lightly on the binder in front of the attorney. And he made his choice very clear. Ethan stood abruptly. His voice cracked. You cannot seriously think this is legitimate. She has never run anything in her life. Grandpa would never bypass me. He told me I would lead someday. Hargrove spoke before I could. Ethan, your grandfather told a lot of people things to keep the peace. But he only wrote down the things he meant. A few board members nodded. Ethan turned red. I deserve this. I have the degree. I have the presence. I have the vision. This company needs direction. She works in operations. She is barely managerial level. I let him finish. No interruptions. No emotions. Just patience. When the room went quiet again, I looked at him calmly. Ethan, this isn't about what you believe you deserve. It's about what Grandpa trusted you with. And legally, you were not trusted with leadership. You weren't even trusted with a share. A few gasps filled the room. Ethan's jaw dropped. You think you can embarrass me like this? I shook my head gently. I'm not embarrassing you. The truth is, I had nothing to do with that. He stepped toward me like he expected me to back away. I didn't. He pointed at the board. This is a mistake. You all know it. She isn't cut out for this. I've been planning strategy, restructuring, leading initiatives. I've already started making changes. That was the wrong thing to say. 3 board members exchanged looks, and one of them, a woman named Catherine Liu, finally spoke. Mr. Collins, the changes you have been making these last weeks were unauthorized. You had no legal standing to fire anyone, hire anyone or alter company operations. A ripple of murmurs. Ethan blinked. What? Catherine folded her hands. You do not hold an executive title. You do not hold a board seat. And until today, all leadership decisions have been held temporarily by council and senior staff. You were acting on assumption, not authority. Someone else muttered quietly, and we let him. The attorney cleared his throat. If it helps clarify, all decisions Mr. Collins made will need to be reviewed for validity. Some may be reversed. Ethan looked between the faces around the table like he was drowning. You're all siding with her. Hargrove smirked slightly. We're siding with the law. I straightened, speaking again. Grandpa didn't choose me to punish you. He chose me because he didn't want the company to become a performance stage. And that's exactly what you've turned it into these last few weeks. Ethan's hands curled into fists. So what now? You're just going to run the company. Just like that. I shook my head. No. I'm not stepping into the CEO seat. The room shifted. Even the attorney's eyebrows lifted slightly. Ethan blinked several times, confused. You're not. No. Because I had already thought about this. Grandpa prepared me, but he also prepared the company with solid leadership in place. Leadership Ethan never noticed because he only cared about titles, not work. I continued, steady and clear, I believe in people who earn their positions. People who understand the structure, the staff, the numbers, the problems, and the potential. People who have been doing the work long before anyone rewarded them for it. I turned to the head of HR. I would like to nominate interim CEO, subject to board confirmation. She blinked. Me. I smiled softly. You are the most qualified person in this building. Grandpa said it more than once. Her eyes filled with tears. Ethan scoffed. You're replacing me with human resources. Catherine cut him off. She knows our people. She knows our systems. And unlike you, she hasn't burned half the staff in 2 weeks. The attorney nodded. The majority shareholder has the right to nominate. The board whispered among themselves, but not for long. Hargrove said, let's vote. The vote wasn't even close. Unanimous. The HR director, shaken and emotional, accepted the role with quiet professionalism. She hugged me quickly after the vote, whispering, your grandfather raised the right person. When she stepped back, the attorney turned to me again. Miss Collins, as majority shareholder, you now need to address the matter of Mr. Ethan Collins's role here. The room went still. Ethan swallowed. You wouldn't fire me. We're family. I held his gaze. Family doesn't give you immunity. It gives you responsibility. And you haven't shown any. His jaw twitched. You can't do this. I spoke quietly, but every word landed. You put the company at risk. You fired people without authority. You hired unqualified consultants. You altered internal processes. And you lied about your position to employees. He looked furious, but beneath it, I saw something else. Fear. Real fear. I continued, you will not be CEO. You will not have an executive position. But I'm not firing you. The board members glanced at each other, surprised. Ethan frowned. Then what? I met his eyes, unblinking. You're being moved to a non-leadership role. One with no decision-making authority. And you'll report to the new CEO, just like everyone else. A few board members raised their brows. A demotion that deep was rare. But fair. Ethan's face reddened. You can't put me under her. She's HR. I tilted my head. She's your boss now. If you can't accept that, the door is on the right. He froze. The attorney nodded. That is within Miss Collins's rights as majority shareholder. The board waited. Ethan shook his head in disbelief, his voice hushed. You ruined everything. I held his gaze. No. You ruined everything the moment you decided you were entitled to something you never earned. He stared at me for a long time. And for the first time in weeks, he said nothing. No excuses. No delusions. No bragging. Just silence. He sank back in his chair. The board moved to finalize decisions, signatures were made and the meeting concluded. When it ended, people came up to shake my hand. Some thanked me. Some looked relieved. Some just nodded with quiet respect. I didn't stay long. When I walked out of the boardroom, the building felt different. Lighter. Not because I held power. But because the chaos was over. At the elevator, Ethan stood waiting. He didn't look at me at first. When he finally did, his eyes were red. He whispered, you embarrassed me. I answered gently, no. You embarrassed yourself. I just stopped you before you did more damage. The elevator opened. He didn't get in. I did. The doors closed quietly between us. When the elevator doors closed, the silence inside felt different. Not heavy, not tense, just quiet in the way empty theaters are quiet after a show ends. The performance was over. The lights dimmed. The actors left the stage. And I finally understood that the company was never meant to be anyone's spotlight. It was meant to survive. It was meant to grow. And it was meant to be led by someone who actually cared about the people inside it. I walked out into the lobby, the afternoon sun spilling through the glass windows. A few employees looked up when I passed. Their expressions were soft, curious, grateful. They didn't know every detail yet, but they knew something had shifted. Something that felt less like a takeover and more like a correction. Outside, the air was warm. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, closing my eyes against the light. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't bracing for Ethan's next move. I wasn't worried about what the board would do. I wasn't pretending not to know things I had always known deep in my bones. I was the majority shareholder of Collins Innovations. Grandpa had trusted me with something that mattered to him more than almost anything else. Not because I was loud. Not because I demanded it. Not because I believed I deserved it. But because he spent his whole life watching people, and he knew exactly who would crumble under power and who would carry it quietly. I got into my car and let out a long, shaky breath I didn't realize I had been holding for hours. The city outside moved like normal, cars idling, people walking, conversations drifting down the street. Everything looked the same, but I felt different in a way that settled into my spine, firm and calm. On the drive home, my phone buzzed several times. I ignored it until I pulled into my driveway. When I checked the screen, there were 4 messages from coworkers thanking me. 2 from board members welcoming me. 1 from the attorney confirming that the filings were complete. And 1 from my Aunt Melissa. She wrote only 4 words. "What did you do?" I stared at the message. Not angry. Not hurt. Just tired of the same question I had been asked my entire life. As if everything I accomplished was something I somehow stole. I typed back slowly. I honored Grandpa. Then I put my phone down and didn't check it again. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, the binder of ownership papers open beside me. I ran my thumb along the edges, thinking about every moment that led to that boardroom. The nights I spent helping Grandpa review projects. The weekends he asked me to sit with him while he explained why he trusted certain partners. The subtle hints he left, even when I was too young to understand. He had chosen me long before the paperwork made it official. The company wasn't a crown he handed down. It was a responsibility. A legacy that wasn't about blood or entitlement, but about understanding the weight of people's work and protecting it. The next morning, I went back to the office before most of the staff arrived. I walked through each floor quietly, greeting a few early risers, listening to the hum of the building, feeling the pulse of a place that finally felt steady. In the executive suite, the HR director who was now interim CEO sat behind what had once been Grandpa's desk. She looked up and smiled when I entered. "You came early," she said. "Just wanted to check in." She nodded. "Everything will be smoother now. We're already reversing the unauthorized changes." People are relieved. Really relieved. I exhaled softly. "Good." She folded her hands. "You know, he would be proud of you." I smiled at that. "I hope so." We talked for a few minutes about contracts and partner meetings. Real work. Work that actually mattered. Then I left her office and stood alone for a moment in the hallway, looking at the nameplate on the door. Acting CEO Margaret Lane. It felt right. It felt earned. Ethan never showed up that morning. Or the next. Word eventually spread that he had taken a few weeks off to reassess his role. That was the phrasing he chose, though everyone understood the truth. He had imagined himself at the top of the company, and now he couldn't bear to walk in and see himself in a seat so far below where he thought he belonged. And the truth is, I didn't hate him. I didn't want him ruined. I just wanted what Grandpa wanted. The right person in the right place. The wrong person out of the wrong place. Clean. Quiet. Fair. When I left the building that afternoon, the receptionist caught my arm gently. She looked nervous at first, then relieved. "Thank you," she said softly. "The last month has been a nightmare. You fixed it without yelling at anyone. That's rare." I smiled. "I didn't fix it alone." She nodded. "Still. You did what needed to be done." I stepped outside into the sunlight again. And for the first time since Grandpa's funeral, I felt something warm settle in my chest. Pride. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that sits behind your ribs and reminds you that some battles don't need shouting. Some victories come from calm voices and steady hands. Some revenge arrives not as destruction but as restoration. And sometimes, the most powerful moment of all is when a room full of people finally sees the truth that was there the whole time. A truth written in ink. A truth spoken in silence. A truth my cousin could never erase. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. If you haven't yet, like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There are so many more stories coming, and I want you right here with me for every one.